You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Close to the end of a long, stressful week, what I really like to do is kick back with my new favorite comfort watch. You know, the show that drops you right into the high-stakes, high-anxiety world of a Pittsburgh ER, HBO's The Pitt. Each season of the Emmy Award-winning show focuses on a single day in the life of nurses, doctors, and patients. For The Pitt's second season, that day is the 4th of July. In other words, chaos, firework injuries, phytophotodermatitis, which is also called margarita burn, heat stroke, deadly skin-eating bacteria, belligerent golfers, not to mention a catastrophic computer shutdown.
Is this a drill?
Westbridge Hospital has shut down all the computer systems.
Are we next?
We're about to go analog.
Okay, on the latest episode, 2 ICE agents are hanging around the ER, scaring patients and staff. We're going to get to what happens with that in just a second. This second season has paid special attention to the hospital's reliance on nurses, including one Jesse Van Horn. He's played by Ned Brower, who is the perfect fit for the role. Brower is a real-life nurse with ER experience. So acting, being a healthcare provider, 2 careers usually enough for most people. But Brower is also a musician. He started working as an EMT and later became a nurse after making his name with the band Rooney. Brower's new project is the electro-pop band Bloodwork. That's spelled Blood, W-E-R-K. And to top it off, Brower hails from right here in the Pacific Northwest from Bellevue. And he's here with me now. Ned Brower, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk today.
Yeah, you're starring in the hottest streaming show. I mean, it's the one that lights up a lot of conversations I have in my life. I'm curious, when did you realize that this thing was a hit?
It was kind of strange to take on because it was sort of happening while we were still making it. So it was happening in real time while we were still shooting season 1. But I knew there was something special about this show right when we started filming, when I walked in the set and was like, oh, wow, okay, it's game on. This is going to be something serious. You know, I already knew the team was pretty renowned for making great television, and obviously I knew Noah Wiley's background and John Wells' background and our showrunner, Scott Gemmell. So I knew I was in good hands, but I don't think any of us anticipated the level of success that the show was gonna find.
I think of it as like a hybrid of prestige and classic network TV. It turns out that medical dramas work for a reason, and they're inherently super high stakes. They've got suspense and emotion. But I think more so than most of those shows in the past, The Pitt is really focused on the real life problems with our medical system. And I'm curious how that has landed with you, having experience working on the front lines in, the healthcare world and sort of seeing the way The Pitt addresses things like uninsured patients, long-term boarding, assault against nurses. Are there issues that you have faced in real life that you see reflected in The Pitt, or how does that land with you?
I mean, I think the thing that I came to realize immediately when I saw the first episode, when they screened it for the cast, was, the over inundation and the overcrowding that happens in the ERs. And that was something that really was, hit me firsthand, having worked in the 911 system with the fire department, running call after call after call, and then having to wait wait on the wall, waiting for beds for patients. And then seeing it from the other side when I became a nurse 5 years ago or 5.5 years ago, seeing this really high patient volume. And I think the show best captured it. And I always remember when I first saw that waiting room, I had seen the set, but I hadn't seen it with all the coughing and the crowding and the sweating and the people in it. So when I first saw that scene on the first pilot episode, my jaw just dropped. And that's when I knew this show was something different and was going to be a hit. I could just tell, because you can just feel that room, smell those smells right through the screen. And that's where I think this show has been uniquely successful and is kind of showing something that hasn't been seen before on a medical drama, of which there are many.
You are right in the heart of season 2. And for those listening, this is where we get to some spoiler territory. If you're not caught up, this is the time to maybe to skip ahead a little bit. Or if you're on the radio, turn the volume down for a sec. you have a shift where so far your character, Jesse Van Horn, is caring for a baby that's been abandoned. And then you're helping this woman with an injured shoulder who's detained by ICE. And your character ends up cuffed on the floor and getting marched out of the ER by 2 ICE agents. What was your reaction when you got that script?
My reaction was great. I sort of first heard mutterings that something was going to happen with the character, like somebody sort of spilled the beans by accident and, asked me, do you think they're going to get a stunt double? But I hadn't read the script yet. So I was feeling pretty nervous for like a day or two. Like, what's going to happen? Am I going to die? Like, do I become a patient? Like, I didn't understand what that meant. And then a day or two later, Noah pulled me aside, and, Noah and I are pretty good friends at this point, and he's a great leader and a kind person. And he pulled me aside. He said, hey, have you read the script for episode 11? And I said, no. And he handed me his like leather bound book that he keeps all his personal scripts in when he's working, and sat me down in his like special chair and said, give it a read. So I read through it, and I walked back up to him with the script, and he looked a little nervous that maybe I would be upset or something. And I just broke out in a huge smile and gave him a big hug because, I was thrilled to have this cool plot point that frankly is sort of heroic. If anything, it makes me look great. And, I think it was like the right character to put in. And they told me afterwards, they really thought long and hard about who they wanted that person to be that gets into that altercation. And I think smartly, they wanted to, use somebody that you wouldn't expect to get, like a white male, middle-aged guy. You don't expect that to happen to that person. And that was exactly the point. They want to show, that these kind of stories can happen to everybody, like everyone's at risk. And so it was a really like fun thing to shoot. And, now I feel like my character has this real like flag in the sand when a lot of times people are like, oh, you're on the show. What character? I play Nurse Jessie. Especially if they haven't seen season 2, they're like, which guy is that? And now it's like, I'm the guy that, did the thing. And it's like something that's, I think people are like grabbing onto, which is great.
How long ago were you filming? Like, was everything in Minnesota already happening? Alex Preddy, Renee Good, everything like that? Or did you film before all of that went down?
We had already written and shot that scene before the Alex Preddy thing happened.
Wow.
So when that happened, I was like, well, I was excited, but I was also nervous because with the instability in politics and all these mergers and all these kind of moving parts that are out of my control happening in the world, my first thought was like, man, are they going to cut that whole storyline, or are they going to beef it up? Like, I didn't really know. In the end, they actually did do some recuts, and they had to reshape the scene to like handle it delicately, but I think they did a good job. I was sad. There was some really other cool stuff that we shot, and there was a lot more fighting and a lot more yelling and a lot more chaos and violence when we, on the page and when we shot it. But in the end, I think rightly so, they like trimmed it down to a thing that made it really impactful without hitting people over the head, because we do want to tell these stories to everybody on different sides of the aisle, and hopefully shed light on a lot of these problems and issues, but without doing it in such a way that's going to turn off half of your audience and half of the country. And, so, I think that they handled it really well. And I'm happy that in the end, like even though we lost a little bit of the, meat on the bone, it was still really impactful and like intact. And I'm really proud of that.
It happens really quickly in the version that aired that I watched last night. And it's shocking, and and everybody is really shaken. All the people in the ER. You, with the medical background that you have, you are part of this cast that famously goes to boot camp sort of before filming starts. Like the thing that I've heard is that people get sort of a crash course in ER work, the actors and people on set right before the season starts. And Noah Wiley, who is Dr. Robbie and an executive producer on the show, says, in a way, you are like another technical advisor on set. Do you ever find yourself like either holding back from saying like too much, like overcorrecting people on set when they're trying to, act like the thing that you do in real life? Or do you do a lot of helping your colleagues like look more authentic?
I do. And when we started the whole show, like they did include me. There was like a very specific chain of command because we do have, several doctors and several nurses that work on the show, specifically to make the medicine look and feel and sound real and be real. And they did kind of attach me to that team, like not technically, I'm not in that department, but they loop me in on those emails in the very beginning to discuss who to talk to if something looks strange. They wanted to make sure there wasn't a whole bunch of people running rogue, like, oh, we'd never do that in the. So I would say like early on, there was like one or two things where it was like really needed to be pointed out because it was obvious to anyone that worked in the field. Like something that comes to mind was like two of the EMTs, the very first day of shooting the first episode, were pushing the gurney backwards. So it was like head first, and that's just like, I mean, it's not weird. Like to a lay person, you wouldn't think anything of it, but I know from doing that job that happens 0% of the time. That's just not at all. That's black and white, and it's visually obvious. So, it had to be pretty bad for me to speak up. But as we've gone, I would say, I like to help the prop guys because they're my buddies. They're like some of my favorite, friends on the show, help setting up the IVs and stuff just to make things be more efficient, not because they're not doing it right, just to help things move. And then I tend to get a lot of questions from the other actors. And, if I know the answer, like, how do I hold my hands when I'm starting an IV? That's great. Like, that's a perfect application for me to help in the moment. But a lot of times they'll ask me, so what's the physiological causation of this brain tumor or something that's like way outside of my field? And then I'm very humble and happy to say, I don't know. I can help you find the answer, but I certainly don't know everything.
You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman, and I'm talking with actor, musician, and nurse Ned Brower. He is Bellevue's very own star of the Pitt. When we come back, how Brower made the turn from acting and being in a rock band to nursing. Stay close. Welcome back to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. I'm talking with actor, musician, and nurse Ned Brower, star of The Pitt. You likely know him as Nurse Jessie if you watch that show. You were working as a nurse, right, when you got the call for The Pitt. Like, what was that like? Did you want to get back into acting? Had you been auditioning? Like, what was your thought process when that call came in?
Well, I totally fantasized about acting again because, I moved to LA in 2000 and was working as an actor in film and TV and commercials and stuff when I was young. I was like in my early 20s and had long blonde hair and was playing mostly the stoner. So I kind of like daydreamed about it, but it's very hard, obviously, to break back in when you've been out of the game for a long time. So when this kind of came around, which really it came through my medicine, I've been a nurse for 5 years and was working with one of the doctors who's an executive producer and writer on the show, Dr. Joe Sachs. So he had become a friend of mine over a couple of years of working together every now and again. And he started telling me about the show during a shift when we were working. And I was like, oh, that's super cool. You should see my wife for this. Like she's an actor. She does a lot of television drama. This is totally her bread and butter. She'd be great. And then ultimately they called me in and I was able to go audition to play this part. I think mainly because they wanted a like nurse to be in the big trauma scenes where there was like pretty intense medical choreography. So that was like initially what I felt like I was doing, in the beginning of the first season and through a lot of the first season. And, they'll give me lines here and there because they pretty quickly realized like, okay, he can say the words and make them real. And we would joke that like I was the numeric narrator season 1, his blood pressure is this, his blood pressure is this, but I found little ways to put a little bit of emphasis or spin on those numbers to help the audience understand, oh, okay, cool, he's going to be all right. Or, oh, that was a surprise and he's not doing well or whatever. And then on top of that, I just, they let me have a little bit of creativity as far as like, how does this guy dress? Like, even when I'm in the background, it was like, they had given me an audition scene with a lot of color, a lot more dialogue than I've ever had, even still on the show. but I just took that blueprint. He seemed like sassy and kind of like smart aleck. And I'm thinking about my age and I'm like, this guy would be like one of the vets, right? Like he's probably really good at his job. He probably started before all the rules changed and before everything was a HR nightmare. He definitely doesn't do his HR modules on time. He's not turning in his paperwork on time, but he's too good to fire and there's no one else to do the job.
So you grew up in Bellevue. You went to college in Texas. You did the acting thing. You did the music thing. You were, a drummer and a singer in a rock band, and then you pivot and you're going and you're an EMT with LA County Fire, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then the nursing thing. Did you think you were going to be a fireman at one point? Were you thinking you would take that path to do the fire thing, or were you always thinking I'm going to keep going with healthcare?
Well, I was initially thinking about firefighting because my band broke up and I had been in Rooney, as a full-time job, traveling the world and making records for like 12 years, which when you're young, that's a really long time. And by the time the band ended, then I was in my early 30s and I was thinking like, I'm like, oh, I have a kid, a mortgage, and a wife. And that ride just ended. And, I'm looking at my resume and there was nothing on it. And so I was like, it was sort of like practical measure. And I was just ruling out like what I don't want to do. It was like, I don't want to work in a cubicle or in like something that's like, uh, you know, doesn't make me feel good, especially after being a rock star. It was like it was a humbling, like difficult transition, but I applied for LA County and it was moving in that direction. And actually, but then I also was meeting all these nurses and I'm like, well, everyone's going this way. What if I go this other direction? Like, I think I can stand out. And I'm talking to all these nurses and the schedule seems cool and they seem to like their job, the ER people for the most part. And it seemed like a job that was going to be in demand. And I just wanted something practical because we had never had that in my, nuclear family. We were just like always leveraged in the arts of the unknown. So that was it. And I was off to the races and it took a long time. I had to go back to community college, which was humbling, and takes basic biology with like freshmen, in college. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the old guy sitting in the front and center asking questions that I used to make fun of. But
And you were like 40 at that point? I mean, you were like an adult. Yeah.
something like that. Yeah. Almost, yeah, right around there. And then, but I really liked it. And being a student, like as a, a little bit older, more mature, I was getting, way better grades in much harder classes. When I had to go back and look at my old transcripts, I'm like, how'd you get a C in the history of film? Like, how amazing does it sound to go to a film class once a week, watch a classic and talk about it with some brilliant professor? Like, that's a dream, I guess I did grow up. Sometimes I don't feel like I matured or changed at all, but I guess that's an indicator that something changed.
You were, trying to get maybe away from the arts into something a little more stable, but then the arts just came knocking, and the arts won't let you go, man. The Pitt came knocking, and then, of course, you have a new music project that is called Bloodwork. First off, where do you find the energy? That is my number one question in my 40s as well now. I don't understand how you do it. Two, how did you find your way back to music? Like, why is music the thing still?
For me, like music is the most like purely creative thing. It's something I discovered as a teen. I mean, I always liked music from when I was young, but I really like growing up in Seattle in the 90s and everything. I really had a front row seat as a young teenager to all the cultural explosion that happened in our city. I met Kurt at a like backstage at an all ages show when he was like full fame. And I was part of this really cool all ages scene on the East Side that really blew up huge because at that time there was no all ages shows downtown. So like a lot of national touring bands started coming to our little like foresty, like renovated firehouse they gave us to have shows.
The old firehouse in Redmond?
Yeah. So I was like ground zero when that started. I was one of the kids that started that. And so, we were having Fugazi come play and Jawbreaker and Superchunk and like all these bands that we loved that eventually started coming to play at our club, and we were doing security and serving drinks and backstage meeting these bands. And Kurt and Courtney showed up one time,
Oh my God.
like shortly before he died. And so that had like a huge effect on me. And I started my own bands then, and I've never stopped. And so like, even when I was first got to LA, I joined Rooney when I was an actor, and Rooney got signed. So that's what really took me out of acting the first time. And I did that forever. And then I've since, worked with all kinds of artists, Mike Viola, who's an amazing, power pop musician producer that everyone loves down here, and Mark Maron from the famous podcast I worked with for several years, running kind of his band and making music for cartoons. I got hired to do some pop songwriting for like the Bob's Burgers teams, had a show Central Park. So like music's like my social network and my hobby and my job always. And so my partner, John Lowe, who's also a Seattle guy, he grew up there. We actually became friends down here probably 10 or 12 years ago. And when I was doing the cartoon music, I brought him in to try because I really like him and we have complementary skill sets. And we had so much fun doing these like songs for cartoons that we were like, I called him, I'm like, we need to make more music. Like we were so good at working together and I just want to do something for fun. And so we started making songs like over a year ago, I would say, just like slowly, we just get together a little bit here and there and they're really great. Like it's some of my favorite stuff I think I've ever made. And we love working together. And the more we were doing it and coming up with this concept, I was like, this isn't that crazy. Like, this is like very good music we're making. And so we're just super excited about it. We just made a music video. And again, it was like so homemade. We had the Pitt special effects makeup guys help make these
the masks are basics. Amazing.
Yeah, and they're like silicone and they're like custom fit.
They're like skulls. Yeah, really graphic, cool skull masks.
Yeah, we were like inspired by 80s, skateboard art graphics and stuff visually. Like we wanted to make kind of like something that felt like Daft Punk, but like 21st century version, like if they were from, Venice Beach, like skateboard punks, which is like what we are basically, or how we grew up. So, we just found that people wanted to, they hear this music and they want to help us with our vision. And we joke that we feel like we work at a management company and a record label and, because it's like so homemade, but this is exactly how I started my first band, the Way Outs in Redmond and Bellevue. It's all the same things I love and making the videos like guerrilla style and stilling shots, but now the cameras are tiny and the gear is affordable. And so we're having like an amazing time. And then Rolling Stone ended up doing a couple features and covered the band last week, right when we put it out, which is right when my big episode happened. And it's just amazing. I hope that we can really like grow this new music project because I think it's like, I'm super proud of it.
We're going to play it here as we go. So people can hear Truth Will Tell, new single from Ned Brower's band Bloodwork. That's Blood, W-E-R-K. Don't get it twisted. I'm digging this music. I am digging the turn that you've made here, again, from like being in a rock band to being more like synth pop. It's giving me a little bit like Broken Bells, a little bit Tennis. Like it's very fun, very like cheeky too with the video that, we've seen already with the skull masks. That's Ned Brower, Bellevue native and actor, musician, and nurse in real life and on the screen as Jesse Van Horn on the HBO show The Pitt. Thank you very much for being here, Ned. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, me too. It's great to talk with you guys. Thanks for reaching out.
And by the way, this is Truth Will Tell, one of the latest singles from Brower's band Bloodwork. I'm Libby Denkman. You're listening to Soundside on KUOW.
With an open mind. Trust me down.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.